Bridges Live. I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. Welcome to Bridges Live. You know you can catch me every Monday on Bridges Live. It comes out on iHeart and iTunes Radio. And you can always reach me on drpaulholisticsciences.com. You know, Bridges Live is about getting you from here to there. It's about information, understanding, and action. I'd like to thank all my sponsors and the people who have been supporting me. And, of course, support is always what we do when we want to pull something together. I have an amazing guest on the line, Dr. Greg Fraser. If you don't know who he is, that's your fault, and we'll move on from there because this man's iconic. He's been writing and publishing and doing everything he can to what you call build economic wealth for the Black America, and it's about education. So let's get right in. Dr. Greg, thank you for coming on Bridges Live.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's George. But I can understand it begins with a G.
Sorry, George.
So, Dr. George Fraser. So, we just want to make sure that if people decide to look me up on YouTube or whatever,
it's Dr. George Fraser. Sorry.
It's okay. I've been called a hell of a lot worse. So
I'm actually.
I appreciate. Go ahead.
When people listen to me, people are going to hear that I'm actually quite nervous for talking to Dr. George Fraser. Like I said, I've been reading and listening to you for several years, and even though I've gone through my journey, it has not been without the light of the people like you have been given us to follow the path. So thank you, Dr. George, for doing that.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for having me on, and that's very gracious, very nice. Very generous of you, and I appreciate the time.
So I want to get into, because I want people to go look you up, Dr. George Fraser, look him up on YouTube, go to his website, look at the information, and then you can understand what this conversation is going to and where it's already started from. I believe what you already said and written, that blacks are already going into economic slavery. You want to explain that just a little bit?
Oh, sure. Sure. In the last 50 years, economically, we have gone backwards. Certainly, we have made progress. We're not enslaved. And, we're not dealing with black codes and all of the things that mitigated our progress once we were freed from slavery. But economically, in the last 50 years, we are at the bottom of every single economic statistic that matters in America. A very interesting study was produced, about a 200-page study by the Institute of Policy Studies, April of 2017. And the conclusion of that study was that by 2053, I'm quoting now the study, by 2053, 10 years after the majority becomes the minority, black household median wealth will be zero if nothing changes among the black community. White median household wealth will be about $250,000, right? So when you have zero net worth or zero wealth, median wealth, you are functionally have worked your way into a second slavery. I mean, try to operate in a market-based economy, in a democratic capitalistic society without money. You can't. So we have to fix that. And no one is going to fix that for us but us. And if I'll say it so boldly, white people will not be saving black people. In fact, white people are not even thinking about black people for the most part. Who are they thinking about? They're thinking about white people. They're thinking about their husbands, their wives, their children, their businesses, their communities, their educational systems. They're not thinking about us as Asians are not thinking about us. They're thinking about them. Now, you cannot hate on a people for that, because I've begged our people in a book that I wrote some 25 years ago, Success Runs in Our Race, The Complete Guide to Effective Networking in the African American Community, to think race and culture first, but not only first. So whatever is going to be done, however we are going to be saved, it will be because of the things that we do that we teach, that we coach, that we train, that we mentor others on. If it doesn't happen, it'll be because of us fundamentally. Now, are there some political and structural and systemic things embedded into American culture that mitigates our options and chances for succeeding? Yes, there is.
Yeah,
Are there some things that can be done? Yes, they can be. But I would advise any black person listening to this podcast not to wait on those. And am I a supporter of reparations? You better believe I'm a supporter of reparations. There's no question about it. America owes us from this original sin. But I'm not waiting on reparations to be my savior and the savior of my family. I am educating myself, becoming financially literate. I'm fairly literate. I mean, I'm certainly way above average, but there is still a lot for me to learn.
Every day.
And every single minute of every single day. And how do you learn that? You learn it by personal growth and development, lifelong learning, constant never-ending improvement, a commitment to reading, a commitment to going to conferences and workshops that focus on two fundamental things that most of our conferences don't, and that is economics or economics and business ownership. Right? Wealth creation and business ownership. That's really what we need to do. We came over here on the Mayflower, and we still own the fewest number of businesses per capita of any culture group in this country, and we've been here 400 years. No one's saving us but us. It's been 400 years, and we ain't saved. Right? So we have to man up and woman up, educate ourselves, focus on financial education and financial literacies in our churches and our schools and at home, for sure, and learn the tricks of the trade of properly managing one's accumulated wealth. I mean, I call it the 4 pillars for the intergenerational transfer of wealth, because that is the spiritual teachings that we've had for literally hundreds of years. Proverbs 13:22 tells us very simply that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Well, we are outside of our own spiritual teaching. A front page article on USA Today last year basically said about African American baby boomers that we will be the first generation of Africans in America to raise another generation that will not do better than us. So in the 400-year history of our people, we are the only generation that will raise another generation that will be worse off. That is not good. Our ancestors must be rolling over in their grave. So much of that is related to the economic illiteracy and the very bad habits that we have around money, one being we are addicted to instant gratification versus delayed gratification. Let me say that a different way, that the goal is to win, not to look like we're winning. Right. I would rather carry a plastic bag with $5,000 in it than to carry a $5,000 Louis Vuitton bag with $100 in it, right? That is looking like you're winning. White people are planning for 3 generations, and we're planning for Saturday night.
You know, I want to touch on something, and again, I want to thank people for listening to Bridges Live, and I'm Dr. Paul Dyer, and you listen to Dr. George Fraser. And Dr. George Fraser has written several books, and again, we're not going to go into the bio, but I want you to go look him up, listen to him on YouTube. But we're talking about generational information. We're talking about, so when we talk about black folks, and we're talking about the mental understanding of where they're at, they are still mentally enslaved, and I've said this in different writings, because they are emotionally not connected to where they're going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no question about that. I would say it a little bit differently. I love how you framed that up. I would say that we are economically immature.
Yeah.
Right? We are acting really like kids with our money, and it's not that we do not have the brain power. We are very, very bright people. There is no question about it. In fact, we're very, very powerful people. Of course, most of us have forgotten that they have forgotten who we really are, that we are the children of the slaves that would not die, that we have the genetic encoding of the great kings and queens of Africa, that we were building pyramids and solving complex engineering problems when other cultures were living in caves, eating each other. So we are an awesome people. We built the first great nations of the world, right? If you go to Egypt, and by the way, let me remind your audience that Egypt is in Africa.
Correct.
It is not in the Middle East, okay? And it was Africans who did that. And you don't have to believe me. Visit Cairo, go through the pyramids, go into the Valley of the Kings, look on the walls of the hieroglyphics and the pictures that were carved and painted on the walls, and they are dark people. Some of them are blue-black, some of them are lighter black, some of them are peanut butter color.
We do come in all shapes and colors.
That's right, just like we look like today. Just like we look like today. So we know that we have the capacity and capability of doing these things, but in a sense we have been tricked and bamboozled. We have been enslaved. We went through the most egregious form of slavery invented by humankind because it was intergenerational slavery. That means that if I was enslaved, let's say today, my children would automatically be enslaved. My grandchildren would automatically be enslaved. My great-grandchildren would be and that went on for 13 generations, and then the psychological holocaust attached to that, the devaluing of who we were, the misrepresentation of our real history, all of the things that one does to control the mind. And you see, and it was Rudyard Kipling who said, if you control the mind, you don't have to worry about the body.
Nope.
Right? Willie Lynch said the same thing in his own way. Control the mind, and you will have control of the people for 1,000 years or more.
And that's the point I want to get to. Because I do a lot of emotional education. Most people know that listen to Dr. Paul. I do a lot of emotional education about the connection to emotions of our mental cognitive studies to our physical inabilities or our physical sickness. We cannot get out of the cognitive study of the brain science that is being manipulated on the people if they're still buying Gucci bags and Louis Vuitton bags. So when I give lectures, I try to tell people this is what's happening to your mind, this is what's happening to your body. You have the ability to change it. And yet the youth are not getting it, and they're not coming to those education classes. My question to you, Dr. George, is why aren't they? Do you have an answer for that?
They aren't because... So I want to say these things and still be loved. As a black man, as a 74-year-old black man living in America, I still have a desire to be loved by my own people. Okay? But we need a butt whipping, and people like you, Doc, need to be saying the things that you're saying, and we know that the key to learning is simplicity and repetition, right? We've got to say them over and over and over, and just as importantly as saying them, we must model them. We must model the behavior that we expect from our people. So that's A. B, we are trying to sword fight with a toothpick, by the way, the powers of the media propaganda. Let's call it that.
And that's what it is.
Right. Now, let me unpack that for a second. A.C. Nielsen did a study a couple of years ago on television viewing habits by cultural group.
And it's great.
And it found that African Americans watch 40% more television than any cultural group in the history of the world. We watch on average 72 hours of television a week. That's 10 hours of television a day.
I read that. Right. I thought it was disgusting. And I'm like, I barely watch any TV.
Right. I mean, but here's the problem with that. The problem with watching 72 hours of television a week is that you're exposed to about 1,200 commercials. Mm-hmm. And 1,200 this is in a week, right? Those 1,200 commercials, that programming, because that's what stuff on television is called. What is it called? It's called programming. That programming turns you into a consumption machine. Right? Because it's worded in such a way, the images are in such a way that touch on the parts of the brain that know, let's call them your soft spots, your weak spots. We are looking for esteem. We're looking to be accepted. We as a people in this country probably have the lowest self-esteem. I call it race-esteem. Let me say that a different way. You see, when I look in the mirror in the morning, if I do not love what I see, there's no way that I can love you, Doc, because
Absolutely.
when I look at you become a reflection of me. That's called low race esteem. And you assuage low race esteem, which is driven by low self-esteem. You assuage that with stuff. Okay, things that say you are somebody. I got to have me a Louis. I got to have me a Gucci.
These sneakers. These stupid sneakers.
I got to have me a Mercedes. I got to have me a Ferrari. Whatever it is that you can afford, that makes you feel like the brand you're wearing, which is excellence and style and flash and dash. That's the statement that you are making vicariously about you.
Now,
right?
is it me? Because I know I have always been highly pissed off at athletes and people who make the money, who are Black Americans, who do not support their own culture, but they go buy these homes, and then 10, 12 years later, they're broke.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know that, and this is a statistical fact, that 80% of athletes who earn $100 million in their career, within 5 years of retirement, they're either broke or in bankruptcy, right? That is the improper management of accumulated wealth, which is one of the 4 pillars for the intergenerational transfer of wealth, right? They do not manage, they know nothing. They're great basketball players, baseball players, or football players, or whatever, golf, whatever, but they know nothing about the proper management of wealth, where you put your wealth to work harder than you worked for it. And many of them are not smart enough or savvy enough to find someone who has spent their life managing and investing money. So I live in Cleveland. LeBron is a friend. LeBron makes $40 million plus a year. He's the baddest basketball player on the planet. LeBron is very bright. Guess who manages LeBron's money? Warren Buffett manages LeBron's money. Now, you could give Warren Buffett a 12-foot ladder, give him a basketball, and he still couldn't dunk it. He knows nothing about basketball. In fact, look, Warren Buffett doesn't even really like basketball. All right? What he likes is money. Mm-hmm. And he understands how to, he's the best and smartest investor that has ever lived. So if you are making all that in a bag of chips, why would you not take that money and give it to someone that really knows that's about investing money? You didn't have to know about basketball. You just have to know about really investing money. So there are plenty of people of our color. There are plenty of people of other color. If you do not trust your own color, and that's a whole nother issue. We can unpack that some other day.
That's another time.
But there are plenty of people that you can give that money to invest for you. Because you make widgets, or you play basketball, or you play golf, or you make your money doing the things that you're really good at. But most of us are not really good, certainly Black people, at managing money.
No.
Right? We have no models. We didn't learn it from our parents, generally speaking. right? We see all the flash and dash that's out there, and we just follow that, right? So we have to, but again, this goes back to the original proposal both of you and I stated. It goes back to fundamental financial education, financial literacy, educating yourself, and watching others who you know, love, and respect model what we are talking about. Not enough of us are modeling it, right? I certainly learned nothing about money growing up in my household, all right, back in the day. Now, and back in the day when I was growing up, no, our families did not have millions of dollars to invest, but the smarter families had something to invest, and they did fairly well, all things considered.
Well, right? The one thing I would say the older community did was invest in each other. So they kept the black dollar amongst the black people. They went to the black stores, the gypsy cabs. So they did spend the money within it, and that's the one thing black economics has a hard time doing, is that their dollar doesn't stay inside the community. And I hope when people hear this, they would already understand that. So let's get to the education. When we send our kids to these public schools that are being taught by mostly white people, white women who are teaching our young boys who don't have many fathers, that's also a systemic situation that's being plagued on our children anyway.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, no question about it. We get it coming and going. So I certainly, as I grew older and wiser, understood that was one of the systemic problems, is the urban education system, of course. We have the worst public education system in urban America than any other part of America, all right? I don't know if you want to be cynical, we can say that's by design. And then the other factor, profound factor that you mentioned, a lot of people don't think about, is that 80% of the people teaching our children don't look like our children, and they don't understand how black people learn. See, we learn differently than white people.
Absolutely.
We're all visual, tactile, kinesthetic, and auditory learners. We're oral, visual, tactile, kinesthetic, and auditory learners, right? And so unless you understand culturally who we are and how to effectively teach us, you're going to have a problem. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I've understood that for many years. So 15 years ago, me and a very good friend of mine started 2 charter schools in the inner cities of Cleveland, Ohio. About 300 children, 60% of them are black boys, right? The only ones we take in our charter schools are the ones who drop out and the ones who are kicked out. And what we then do is send them to college. That's what we do, because the people, the teachers, the instructors, the administrators, the leaders in our charter school look like the children that they're teaching, and we know how to teach our children. They don't. We do, right? So this is a part of a simple philosophy that I've been preaching for years with black people, that the bottom line goal for all of us of means, all of us that have risen above the masses, is to ultimately learn, earn, and return.
No.
We got a lot of us learning, we got a lot of us earning, but not enough of us are returning. I left the inner city to take my kids because I have a moral responsibility to give my children the best education I can afford, right? But I wanted my 2 sons to go to public schools, which means that I had to move into a neighborhood that had the best public schools in Ohio. Now, it costs a little more to do that. I left the hood, did that, gave my kids the best education money could buy, and then what did I do? I went back and started 2 schools right in the area from which I left, right, to raise up and to teach. I couldn't save 71,000 black kids in the Cleveland public education system, but I could save 300.
Now, when you say hood, I definitely believe that, because it used to be a neighborhood, now it's just a hood. Because when you don't, when you don't own anything in your neighborhood, it is just a hood. So now here's the thing I have. I also, you can also call this very cynical, is that I kind of blame the churches. Now, why didn't our black churches start the schools like the Catholic schools started for them?
Well, that's deep. That's deep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, who can argue with that, right? So let us say that they did not do that in any sort of significant way.
No.
Okay? Now, so the question now, let us say that was then.
Let's go now.
This is now, okay? There's a couple of other things about the black church, and I've said this in black churches. There's no place on earth, certainly for black people, where we gather every single Sunday. Of course, Sunday is the most segregated day in America, so black people go to black churches. We are some of the best orators, the best preachers on the planet, right? So for the last 50 years, right, we have heard the best sermons by the best pastors, I think, in the world. But for some reason, over the last 50 years, we have gone backwards. Right, not forward.
Right.
We up in church. We tithing. We're giving to church. Right. So the question is, why, Dr. Fraser, with the best messaging and the best orators, why have black people not moved forward? It would be one of two reasons. And again, I want to say this and still be loved. Either our pastors are not preaching and teaching the right things, or we're not listening. One of the two.
It's either one of the two. It can't be. It can be both. It can be both, but it's one or the two.
That's right. So, and now you have to understand. Let's move forward to economics in the church. That there are 2,500 references to economics and money in the Bible, but yet very little is preached about that particular subject matter in our churches. Now, the more progressive churches, now, I'm not talking about prosperity ministry and all that kind of stuff. That's a whole other thing, and I don't buy into that at all. I think there's something fundamentally sort of odd about that. So I'm talking about teaching fundamental wealth principles that can be lived out every single day, that can have a spiritual base. It's all up in the Bible. That is not a subject matter that we tend to focus on in the black church, right? In the Jewish temples, they focus on that.
They do.
That's what they preach and teach, all right? That economics and wealth creation and philanthropy as the moral foundation. If you look at the Jewish agenda, it is 4 parts. It is tribalism. In other words, it is the Jew first.
Yes.
Okay. There's tribalism.
In their community.
Education. They emphasize education. They want to be the smartest people in the room. It's then wealth and economics. That's number 3. And then the final one is philanthropy. Philanthropy, that if you are a Jew of means and you do not give back to Jewish causes and Jewish institutions, you are socially isolated and ostracized. You're out. You cannot come to the major events and the prestigious events of Jewish people because as far as Jews are concerned, you are cheap, right? You are not fulfilling the moral grounding and spiritual rooting of the Jewish teaching. We have no system of social isolation and ostracization in the black church. You could, get $1 billion from Apple, write a check with your partner for $40 million for USC. We're talking about Dr. Dre.
Yeah,
he didn't go to USC.
He didn't go there at all.
And not give 1 penny to historically black colleges. And if Dr. Dre showed up at any church, you wouldn't be able to get on the block and he'd be sitting up next to the pastor. So we don't ostracize. We don't identify and ostracize brothers and sisters of means that do not give back to their own people. We can look at our athletes. We can look at our entertainers, right? And those that do, it is a token of what, in fact, they earn.
Now,
right?
now, Dr. George, now you would not call him a sellout. I don't call him a sellout because I like the way you phrase it. Is that I still want to be loved by my people, but here's what they are. I still think they're mentally enslaved and cognitively crippled.
Yes. Well, not only that, but they did not. That's not philanthropy as a concept, as an idea, as a cornerstone of the upliftment of a culture and a people is not taught. That's not taught. Now, more of us are giving than ever before. What Robert Smith did at Morehouse by paying off. I mean, that's a new paradigm, right? That's a new paradigm. That's philanthropy at its finest. Of course, Oprah does some wonderful things, and we can name some. But more and more of that has to get the kind of publicity. It has to be modeled, and it has to be championed. Now, we also have to be honest. We don't have nearly as many, let's call them, for lack of a better term, millionaires and billionaires as white folks. There are 35,000 black millionaires in America. Don't get excited. There are 1.5 million white millionaires. Okay? And we're 400 years in. We came here on the Mayflower. So they have one hell of a head start. We know why. If this was a 100-yard dash, we would be on the 5-yard line. They would be on the 95-yard line. Okay? So they have one heck of a head start. And for all the reasons we understand, right? And they are about the control of the economics and the wealth of a nation. That's what they are. They believe they built this nation. They discount or diminish the value of the first and most important economic base that helped to fuel and fund this country. We did that on our backs, was the whole industry of cotton. And that's the work that we did. But that is discounted by them, and they give it some credit, but they do not give it, they only give it lip service. They do not and do not want to, if they could wave a magic wand, give anybody any kind of reparations. Right? I mean, we've been talking about reparations for 2 generations.
We sure have. And I'm not even sure if it's ever going to come to fruition, not because it's not a good thing or the right thing to do. It's because I don't think enough black people have enough common sense, or not enough educated economic sense to fight for it.
That's right. I think you're right.
We have more blacks who would join up for a step show or a rap show than to go out and vote or build a business. It's ridiculous.
No, that's very important. You said that. I'm glad you said that because I wrote a piece on the whole Popeyes thing that went down. Right?
Oh my goodness!
$63 million of free advertising, $100 million of chicken sandwiches. With our brothers and sisters would wait outside at Popeyes for 2 hours for a chicken sandwich, but 45% of the black registered voters in America did not vote in the last election.
Yep.
Right? So to your point, we will wait for a chicken sandwich, right? But we will not wait to vote. Right? So there's something fundamentally wrong with our thinking, with our mindset, with our mentality, right? We are still deeply wounded people, right? And too many of us, not all of us, but too many of us still have an enslaved mentality. Right,
and I'm going to stop you right there because I know, Dr. George Fraser, you are a busy man, and we can talk all night, and it's a blessing that I will get to talk to you all night. But we're going to cut this radio and Bridges Live done. And if you want
part one, we'll call this part one.
We'll call this part one. Thank you. We'll call this part one. You listen to Dr. Paul and Bridges Live, and we've been talking with Dr. George Fraser, and I will put his input in the informational of the podcast and the radio show, because again, if you don't know who he is, that's probably why you're still broke, and that's why you're still sad. So that's more your fault, but hopefully this will wake you up, because we need conscious people, not just conscious people to think they're conscious, but awoke people to know that they're consciously awoke. So there is a difference between thinking you're awake and being awake. So thank you so much, Dr. George Fraser. So if you can leave us off with one snippet, and then we'll cut this off.
Yeah. Brothers and sisters, I want to say to you very simply what I sign in all the books that I sign around the world. Stay the course. Now, what does that mean, Dr. Fraser? It means chart a good and righteous course. Because everything that is good is not right for you. Stay that course, and then all that is due you will come to you.
God bless you, Dr. Fraser. God bless.
Thank you.